Hi, I'm Naomi, and today I'm planting a peony bare root. This is what they look like when they arrive. It is a big chunk of established peony bare root there, and it's autumn now. It's a really good time to plant. You can plant them between late September and late November. I'd say that it'd be absolutely fine to get them in the ground around about then. They're harvested in the summer, so to plant them as fresh as possible is always good. And as the autumn goes on, these little buds, you can see there's about three or five buds on there ready to grow in the spring, but they're already swelling now, and you can see some little pink buds there, and each one of those buds will grow into a stem, and that will have leaves on it, and this bare root will form a bushy little plant. Over the years it will establish and get bigger each time until it reaches a size of around 1 by 1 metres. They don't get to that size straight away. You've got to have a bit of patience. They take a couple of years to establish. In the first couple of years they stay quite compact and leafy, and you may get 1 or 2 blooms even in the first year with these, because it's pretty established root, that one. And they just get better and better every year really. Once they're fully established, they sort of stay at this nice sort of bushy size, and they don't really get any bigger than that. This one's called 𝗂𝘂𝗯𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 a normal herbaceous peony. An 𝗳𝗱 peony is a cross between a tree peony and a herbaceous peony, and 𝗳𝗱 is just short for intersectional. Yeah, so you plant them in the same way, whether you have an 𝗳𝗱 peony or a herbaceous peony bare root. They just go in the ground. They're fully hardy, down to around about -15. They're real tough plants. So you don't need to worry about growing them in a greenhouse, potting them up or anything like that. It couldn't be simpler. You just dig a hole, pop it in and leave it over winter. It'll stay sort of dormant and then it'll just start to grow the following spring, and you'll see some leaves popping up. And you can also plant peony bare roots in the spring, but if you get them in the autumn, you need to plant them in the autumn because they were harvested in summer. They won't really last being unplanted until the following spring. If you want to plant your peony in the spring, you need to buy it in early spring or winter so that you get a freshly harvested root that's ready to grow in the spring. Now you can plant peony bare roots in pots or borders. I think they're happiest in borders really, in the full sun or semi-shade, nice deep soil that's been well dug. They're not really overly fussy. They don't need loads of nutrients, loads of mulch or things dug in. They don't really like a clay soil, so if you have got a heavy clay soil, it's worth digging in some mulch and maybe some grit and stuff as well, so that they're not sitting in soaking wet soil. They don't really like to be soggy plants. They prefer to be a bit on the dry side than a bit wet. So, what you do, if you're planting in a border, you dig a hole, which is about this sort of deep. You want the whole root to be submerged. So you see these little buds poking up out the top, and it's tempting to leave them above the surface, but they want to be below the surface, so that it will be about the top bud will be about 5 centimetres below the soil surface. So I'm going to dig a hole this deep. If you're planting them in a pot, you're going to need a fairly good sized pot. I would say a 12 to 14 inch pot will do a peony plant for the first couple of years. Then it will need to go either in a bigger pot or out into the ground. And if you're planting in a pot, it's probably best to use a soil-based compost rather than a multi-purpose compost. Multi-purpose compost is a bit light and fluffy. You want something a bit more heavy-duty, put a bit of soil in there, maybe a John Innes or just topsoil or soil from the garden. They definitely sort of prefer soil and something a bit more robust than a fluffy compost, which loses its nutrients very quickly and structure. Right, let's get planting. So, just going to dig a hole here. I've dug it all over, taken the weeds out. Got a spot here which is in sun for most of the day, despite being under a birch tree. The sun comes round here, so it has a little bit of dapple shade towards in the afternoon, but they quite like sun and partial shade. It will be fine as long as the soil you're planting in is nice and fluffy. You don't want to be planting in something which is really dense. There we go. dug the hole wide enough to fit that whole piece of root in. You don't want to bend or break it when you put water in. So there we go, buds facing upwards. If you get your peony when it's only just been harvested, say it's early September, the buds may still be really, really tiny, so you might have to look for them. But you can usually see which kind of direction they're going in. And this way, just plant it like this, horizontally. All roots come in different shapes and sizes naturally, but you'll see some little buds on there, and they go upwards. And then, now that's in, I'm just going to cover it over. The top bud on there is going to be about 5 centimetres below the soil surface. Cover it over. And there we go. That's not going to do anything now until the spring, so I'm not going to see any leaves for a few months. Just so I don't forget it's here, I've made a nice little plant label. It says 𝗱𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗲 on there. And that's also so I don't forget the name. But most importantly, when I'm planting my bulbs later on in the autumn, I don't want to stick my spade in and slice my nice peony plant in half. So if I get that there, I'll remember. Now, if you're planting in autumn, the soil might be nice and damp anyway. It's mid-November now, everything's pretty damp here, and may not even need watering in. Peonies don't really like to be very wet, but it is a good idea to water it in anyway, because this settles the roots, the soil around the roots, so there's no air gaps in there. So what I would do is get a watering can, maybe half a can full on here, with the rows on, so it's nice and sprinkly. So give that half a can of water, just so that all the soil settles down around the roots. There are no gaps, no air gaps in there, and that will be snug for winter. It won't need any more water at all over winter, because it's probably going to rain and be cold quite a lot, and you don't want it to start to rot or anything like that. So no more water. In the spring, that should start to pop up. It's tempting to water them regularly when you start to see the leaves in growth, but peonies don't really like that. Their leaves can start to curl if they get too wet. So when you see this growing in the spring, if it looks happy, leave it, and it should be absolutely fine. On really hot days, if it's in its first year, it might appreciate some water. If we're having a long spell of drought, or if it's really warm through the spring, you can give it some water in its first year. But generally speaking, peonies are low maintenance plants. You can just leave them to it and they fend for themselves most of the time, which is really handy. So this plant will grow leaves, start growing leaves from around about April, and then it will flower from May to June every year. Maybe not in the first year, sometimes they do. This is a pretty big root, so maybe a couple of blooms on there, but I would usually expect it to start flowering from the second year onwards. So it will stay small in the first year. It'll get bigger each year until it reaches its established size, which is a nice sort of bushy 1 by 1 metre sort of size. And then they're really easy to care for once you've planted them as well. It does its thing. In the summer it has leaves, you leave it to it, and then in the autumn the leaves start to die back, go all crispy, and gets to about this time of year again, October, and you just cut it all off at the bottom. So imagine there's some like leaves here and stuff, and you just get your secateurs, cut all those off, just about an inch from the ground. That's done. It just stays there dormant over winter again, and then the next spring it all grows up again. So that's really easy plants. In a few years' time, when it's really getting going, especially if you have it in a pot, it might start to get really compacted. So you might want to divide it, which is a great way of getting plants for free. You dig it out of the ground, the plants are out of the pot, and the roots are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the plant's really nice and bushy and everything. You think, right, this can be divided now. So what you do is, if you can't actually separate it into good chunks, then you just slice through it with a spade, making sure there are some visible buds on each part, otherwise you won't get a second plant from the other bit. So there should be buds all over it, and then you can divide it in half and plant each piece. You can plant one piece back in the pot and one piece out in the border, and there you have 2 plants. They may take they have a bit of a setback after that and grow quite slowly for another year, but then they're on their way again, and that's really handy. Nice to have an extra plant. And that's about all I can fill you in on planting peonies, and I hope you found this video useful.